Welcome to today's episode of the Deep Dive Credit Podcast, presented by Elite Credit Solutions. We are your trusted partner in affordable credit repair, proudly based in Tampa, Florida, and dedicated to serving clients across the entire United States. Join us as we explore the intricacies of credit management, share expert insights, and empower you with the knowledge you need to achieve your financial goals. Get ready for an enlightening journey into the world of credit. Let's dive in.
Ever been in like a fender bender and kind of thought, well, at least my insurance, will cover this. But what if the other driver doesn't have insurance?
Oh, yeah.
That's where today's deep dive comes in.
Right.
We're going to be taking you on a crash course in uninsured motorist coverage, or UM for short.
Okay.
And our guide for this journey is a fantastic piece from Experian.
Oh, yeah, those guys.
Yeah, those financial gurus we all rely on.
Yeah, those guys are good.
So
It's amazing how many drivers are out there, like, cruising around without proper insurance. It's like playing a real-life game of bumper cars where only you have a safety net.
okay, that's kind of scary.
Yeah,
So UM coverage is like my personal shield in those situations.
exactly. Think of it as an extra layer of protection on your car insurance policy.
Okay.
If you're in an accident where the other driver is at fault and they don't have insurance, or if it's a hit and run, your UM coverage steps in to help with the costs.
That's a relief. But hold on, wouldn't my collision coverage handle hit and runs?
Well, that's where it gets a little tricky. Surprisingly, collision coverage doesn't always apply in those situations. And even if it does, there might be limitations. UM coverage can help fill those gaps.
Okay, so IM is sounding pretty important. The article mentions two main types, bodily injury and property damage. Can you break those down for me?
Sure thing. Bodily injury covers medical bills for you and your passengers' lost wages if you can't work, and even pain and suffering. Think of it as a safety net for your health and well-being after an accident.
So it goes beyond just, basic medical costs. What about UM property damage?
That was all about fixing your car. It helps cover repair costs and might even chip in for a rental car while yours is in the shop.
So if other driver totals my car and they don't have insurance, my UM property damage steps up to the plate.
You got it. It can help save you from a major financial headache.
I'm starting to see why this is a must-have, but is it even a choice? Is UM coverage required by law?
That's where the legal landscape gets interesting. It's a bit of a patchwork quilt across the U.S. Some states make UM bodily injury mandatory, but not property damage. Others require both.
That makes sense. Each state has its own, rules of the road. Are there any interesting examples from the article that stood out?
Definitely. Rhode Island, for instance, has a unique twist. It's the only state that allows you to reject UM coverage in writing. Imagine having to put pen to paper and declare, nope, don't want that protection.
Wow, that's fascinating. It really highlights how serious they are about making sure drivers understand what they're potentially giving up. What about states where UM is optional? Is it still a good idea?
The Experian article makes a compelling argument for considering it, regardless of your state's laws. Remember, those medical bills and car repair costs can add up quickly.
Right. I'd hate to be stuck with a 5-figure repair bill just because the other driver wasn't insured.
Exactly. And even if you have health insurance, it might not cover everyone in your car or offer the same level of protection as bodily injury. It's about having that extra peace of mind.
Okay, I'm sold. So how much coverage should I get? Is there a magic number?
A good rule of thumb is to match your coverage to your liability coverage. Liability is what pays out if you're at fault. Let's say your liability coverage is $100,000 per person with a $300,000 limit per accident, like the article mentions. Aim for that same amount with your
So basically, I'm mirroring my liability protection to make sure I'm covered no matter who's at fault. That makes a lot of sense.
You've got it. It's all about creating a balanced safety net.
This is all great information, but how much is this extra peace of mind going to cost me?
The surprising part is that it's incredibly affordable. The article states that on average, coverage adds a mere $5 per month to your car insurance bill. That's like a fancy coffee or two.
Wow, I was expecting a much higher price tag. So for the cost of a couple of lattes, I can get this added protection. Sounds like a no-brainer.
You're catching on quickly. It's all about assessing the risk versus the cost. And in this case, the benefits far outweigh the expense for most people.
This is a great jumping-off point. I'm already thinking about all those what-if scenarios on the road.
That's what we're here for. But there's so much more to uncover. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dive into some real-life situations where coverage becomes a true lifesaver.
Welcome back to our deep dive into uninsured motorist coverage.
Yeah.
Before we went off the rails with Rhode Island's unique laws,
Right.
we were talking about how this coverage is all about having your back in those what-if moments on the road.
And speaking of what ifs,
Okay.
let's talk about hit and runs. You know those heart-stopping moments when someone hits your car and just keeps going?
Ugh, don't even remind me. A friend of mine went through that, and it was a nightmare trying to sort everything out.
It's definitely a stressful situation,
Yeah.
but that's where coverage can be a real game changer. A lot of people assume their collision coverage would handle hit and runs,
Oh, really?
but that's not always the case.
I always thought collision was for any type of accident, regardless of fault.
It's a common misconception. Collision coverage typically focuses on damage to your vehicle, regardless of who's at fault. But when it comes to hit and runs, there might be specific clauses or limitations. That's where coverage steps in, especially the bodily injury portion.
So if I'm injured in a hit and run, my bodily injury might cover my medical bills even if my collision coverage doesn't fully apply.
Exactly. It's like having an extra layer of protection, specifically for those situations where the other driver is MIA.
That's a huge relief to know. It really highlights how important it is to understand the nuances of your insurance policy. You know, it's one thing to have insurance, but it's another to actually know what you're paying for.
I couldn't agree more. It's about being an informed consumer and making sure you have the right coverage for your specific needs.
Okay, so we've established that coverage is pretty crucial, but are there any situations where it wouldn't apply? Like, what if I get hit by someone who says they have insurance at the scene, but it turns out later they were lying?
That's a fantastic question. And it's where things can get a bit more complicated. In most cases, if the other driver initially presented proof of insurance, but it later turned out to be invalid or fraudulent, your coverage would likely still kick in.
Oh, okay.
However, it might involve a more thorough investigation and claims process.
So there's still a chance of being protected,
Right.
but it might take a bit more time and effort to get everything sorted out.
Precisely. And that's another reason why it's so important to have a good understanding of your policy and to work with a reputable insurance agent or company who can guide you through those tricky situations.
Speaking of tricky situations, the article mentioned that the cost of coverage can vary depending on where you live. Why is that?
It all boils down to risk assessment. Insurance companies analyze data on things like the number of uninsured drivers in each state. If you're in a state with a higher percentage of uninsured motorists, statistically, you're more likely to be in an accident involving one.
So it's like a supply and demand situation. More uninsured drivers equal higher demand for coverage, which leads to higher premiums.
Exactly. And it's worth noting that even within a state, your location can impact your rates. Urban areas with denser populations and higher traffic volumes tend to have more accidents, including those involving uninsured drivers.
This is making me rethink my whole approach to car insurance. I'm starting to see how it's not just about getting the cheapest quote, but about making sure I'm adequately protected based on my individual circumstances and where I live.
You're hitting the nail on the head. It's about finding that sweet spot between affordability and comprehensive coverage. And that's where having those open conversations with your insurance agent or company is so valuable.
So before we wrap up part 2 of our deep dive, if you could leave our listeners with one key takeaway, what would it be?
I'd say it's this. Don't underestimate the importance of uninsured motorist coverage. It's about protecting yourself from a very real risk that many drivers face on the road. It's about ensuring you're not left with a mountain of bills or facing financial hardship because someone else chose to drive without proper insurance. And remember, for a relatively small cost, you can gain a significant amount of peace of mind.
I love that peace of mind is priceless, especially when it comes to something as important as car insurance.
And speaking of different types of vehicles, you raised an interesting question before about coverage for motorcycles, RVs, and the like. That's a topic that deserves its own deep dive, which is exactly what we'll be doing in part 3. So buckle up and get ready to explore the world of coverage beyond just your everyday car.
Welcome back to the final stretch of our deep dive into uninsured motorist coverage. We've covered a lot of ground, from hit and runs to the surprising affordability of this often overlooked protection.
And as we shift gears into the last lap of our conversation, I'm excited to tackle that question you raised earlier.
Yeah.
Remember how we've been focused on coverage for cars?
Right.
Well, what about all those other vehicles sharing the road?
Right. It's easy to get caught up in the world of four-door sedans, but there are tons of folks cruising around on motorcycles, piloting RVs, or hauling cargo in their trusty pickups. Do they need to think about coverage too?
Absolutely. The risk of encountering an uninsured motorist doesn't discriminate based on the number of wheels or the size of the engine. It's a universal concern.
So logically, it makes sense that coverage for those vehicles would be just as important, if not more so, considering some of them, like motorcycles, offer less inherent protection.
You're spot on.
Yeah.
If you're cruising on a motorcycle and get hit by an uninsured driver, the potential for serious injury is significantly higher. And the same goes for folks in RVs or smaller, more vulnerable vehicles. The financial implications of an accident can be even more devastating.
This is making me realize how much I took coverage for granted. Like, I just assumed it was something you added to your car insurance and that was it. But it's a whole other ballgame when you start factoring in these other types of vehicles.
It's all about recognizing that insurance needs are as diverse as the vehicles on the road. What works for your sedan might not be sufficient for your weekend motorcycle adventures or that cross-country RV trip you've been planning.
So what's the best course of action for listeners who might be in this situation? Should they just assume their car's coverage automatically extends to their other vehicles?
That's a recipe for a potential insurance blind spot. Never assume anything when it comes to coverage. The best advice I can give is to be proactive. Reach out to your insurance agent or company and have a frank conversation about your specific needs.
So basically, it's time to channel my inner insurance detective and get all the facts.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to ask questions. What types of coverage are available for my motorcycle? Does my RV require any special endorsements or add-ons? Knowledge is power when it comes to protecting yourself financially.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of uninsured motorist coverage, I'm struck by how much we've uncovered beyond the basics. It's not just about checking a box on your insurance policy. It's about understanding the nuances, the potential gaps, and the specific needs based on your individual situation and the vehicles you drive.
I couldn't agree more. It's been a journey of peeling back the layers and revealing those hidden gems of knowledge that can truly empower listeners to make informed decisions about their coverage.
And that's what the deep dive is all about. We're not here to give you all the answers, but to equip you with the right questions and the critical thinking skills to navigate the complexities of insurance, finance, and beyond.
So as we sign off, remember that peace of mind doesn't happen by chance. It's a result of taking the time to understand your risks and having the right protection in place.
Beautifully said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And remember, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay safe out there on the roads.
That wraps up another insightful episode of the Deep Dive Credit Podcast, brought to you by Elite Credit Solutions, your go-to resource for affordable credit repair across the United States. We appreciate you joining us today, and we hope you found the information valuable and empowering. If you're ready to take control of your financial future, don't hesitate to reach out to us at 813-317-6776. Additionally, don't forget to like today's podcast, share with your friends on social media, follow us, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay in tune with future updates. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep striving for excellence in your credit journey.